Mr. President, as the ranking member of the Budget Committee, I want to discuss this afternoon an issue of very serious concern to tens of millions of Americans, and that is the Republican effort to cut Social Security, disability insurance benefits, and perhaps benefits for Social Security retirees. In my view, and in the view of seniors throughout the state of Vermont, this is a very, very bad idea. As you know, on the very first day of the new Congress, House Republicans passed the rule, later adopted by the full House, which would prevent the common practice of rebalancing funds from the Social Security Retirement Program to the Social Security Disability Program. This rule, adopted by the Republicans in the House, would lay the groundwork for a 19% cut in disability benefits next year. President Obama, in his budget, did exactly what has been done on 11 separate occasions in the past. Always, and here's the point I want to make time and time again, and why this is a manufactured crisis, this has been done 11 times in the past, always in a non-controversial way, and that is to rebalance the funds between the two programs. This is not a big deal. Mr. President, the Republicans are manufacturing a crisis where none exists. Time and time again, Democratic presidents and Republican presidents with absolutely no controversy have done what President Obama has proposed to do. This was done in 1968 under President Johnson, 1970 under President Nixon, 1978, 79, and 80 under President Carter, 1982, 83, 84, and 87 under President Ronald Reagan, 94, 96, 97, and 2000 and beyond under President Bill Clinton. In other words, this is a totally non-controversial process done time and time again under Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. Now, what the President is suggesting today is that we reallocate funds from the Senior Retirement Fund to the Disability Fund. But interestingly enough, of the 11 times that funds were reallocated, it turns out that on 5 occasions, it was money going from the Disability Fund to temporarily help out the Retirement Fund. Mr. President, there are some people who sadly are trying to divide the senior population from the disability population. And what they are saying, in a way that is untruthful and unfair, is that by reallocating money into the Disability Fund, we are taking funding away from seniors and the Retirement Fund. And this is absolutely untrue, because as I've indicated, on 11 occasions, we've seen this reallocation, and sometimes, in fact, it comes from the Disability Fund to help the Retirement Fund. And Mr. President, I am very happy to tell you that virtually every senior organization in America, organizations representing tens of millions of senior citizens, have made it clear that we must reallocate funds, that we must prevent a cut in disability benefits, and we must do what has been done time and time again. Mr. President, let me briefly read a letter from the AARP. And as you know, the AARP is the largest senior organization in America. And this letter was written on July 22nd, 2014, and it went to Chairman Ron Wyden and Ranking Member Orrin Hatch of the Finance Committee. And what the letter says, and I quote, "As the largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization representing the interests of Americans age 50 and older and their families, we write in advance of the committee's legislative hearing on the Social Security Disability Insurance Program to express our support for Social Security, including its disability insurance functions, and our support of rebalancing payroll taxes to ensure the earned benefits of 11 million disabled Americans and their families are not reduced or put at risk. End of quote. Once again, AARP, we support the rebalancing payroll taxes to ensure the earned benefits of 11 million disabled Americans and their families are not reduced or put at risk. And, Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that that letter be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. But, Mr. President, it is not just the AARP who holds that view. It is dozens and dozens of senior organizations all across the country. And let me read you very briefly from a letter written by the Leadership Council of Aging Organizations, dated October 9th, 2014, and it is a letter that goes to the President Obama. And what it says is, and I quote, "We urge you to include a non-controversial, common-sense legislative adjustment in your 2016 budget for Congress to temporarily reallocate the Social Security payroll contributions to address the anticipated shortfall in the Social Security Disability Insurance Program. We also strongly urge you to reject proposals to cut Social Security benefits coverage or eligibility," end of quote. That is the Leadership Council of Aging Organizations. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that that letter also be included in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me be very clear and tell you that despite what some of us see on our TV screens and what we hear from some politicians, the simple truth is that Social Security is not going broke. Social Security is not going broke. Today, Social Security has a $2.8 trillion surplus in its trust fund and can pay out all benefits to all beneficiaries, the elderly and the disabled, for the next 18 years. This is not the opinion of Senator Bernie Sanders. This is the opinion of the Social Security Administration in their latest report. There is and can be no debate about these simple facts. Mr. President, if we rebalance funds, as President Obama and many others have proposed, all benefits, retiree benefits for our older Americans and disability benefits for disabled Americans, would be paid out for the next 18 years. Next 18 years. So people who come before you and say Social Security is going broke, they are simply not telling the truth. And while this 18-year period makes it clear that we do not have an imminent crisis with regard to Social Security, I do agree with those who want to make sure that Social Security is solvent for a lot longer than 18 years for our kids and for our grandchildren. And frankly, Mr. President, when we talk about the long-term solvency of Social Security, and that, of course, includes disability insurance as well, there are two basic approaches that we can take for those who want to extend Social Security for many, many decades. One approach is what many of my Republican colleagues are talking about. And what they are saying, in essence, is that in order to save Social Security, we have got to cut Social Security. And some are talking about a so-called chain CPI, which would mean a cut in cost of living adjustments. Some are talking about raising the retirement age, at which point seniors will be able to get the benefits. And some, in fact, are talking about privatizing Social Security, and giving that program over to Wall Street. And that is one approach. That is one way that we could deal with Social Security and the future of the program. Needless to say, that is an approach that I very, very strongly disagree with. The other approach, an approach which is widely supported in poll after poll by the American people, extends Social Security and protects Social Security in a very different way than many Republicans are proposing. And that is, it addresses the issue that right now, as most Americans know, there is a cap on the income that is subjected to the Social Security payroll tax. That cap is now at $118,500. In other words, one individual makes $11.8 million a year, but only pays 6.2% on the first $118,000 he earns. The second individual makes $118,000 and pays Social Security taxes on all of that income. And that, I think, most Americans believe is patently unfair. Mr. President, I have introduced legislation in the past, and I am now working with other senators who have introduced similar type legislation, which eliminates the cap on income subject to the Social Security payroll tax. My own view is that we should apply the Social Security payroll tax to income above $250,000. If we do that, Mr. President, if we go down that very simple and fair route of asking very, very wealthy individuals, the top 1%, top 1.5%, to contribute more into the Social Security Trust Fund, the fact is that we could extend Social Security for decades, disability benefits for decades, and in fact, we would have enough money to expand benefits, not cut them. Mr. President, in March 19th, 2013, in response to a letter that I wrote to the Social Security Chief Actuary, he wrote back and he told us that taking the approach that my legislation lays out, raising the cap on taxable income starting at $250,000, that would extend the life of Social Security past the year 2060. So for anybody to come on this floor and say, in order to save Social Security, we've got to cut benefits at a time when millions of senior citizens in this country are struggling to pay for the medicine they need, to keep warm in the winter, to buy the food they need. People out there living on $13,000, $14,000 a year, and there are some who say we got to cut Social Security. Let me go on record as saying I strongly disagree. And the far better and far fairer approach is to lift the cap on taxable income and start at $250,000. So if we're serious about extending the life of Social Security, if we are serious about not cutting disability benefits, there is a path forward. Yes, it does ask the people on top to contribute a little bit more. And I know that with all the lobbyists and all the campaign contributions coming in here, that sometimes becomes tough. But it is the right thing to do. Let us stand with millions of seniors who are struggling to stay alive economically in these tough times rather than wealthy campaign contributors. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor. Mr. President, I'm sorry. I would ask unanimous consent to put into the record the letter I received from the Chief Actuary of the Social Security.
Is there objection? Without objection.